What does your high tide dream mean? For that matter, what does your low tide dream mean? Tide dreams are about timing. Now, I want to clarify right off, this is not about a dream having to do with flood waters rising and overwhelming you. That is more like a drowning dream. And at the end of this video, I'll have a link to my many water dream videos, and among them, is drowning dreams. Now, it's not about a tidal wave either. This is about dreams having to do with the tide rising or going down or being high or low. Now, have you heard that quote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men that taken at the flood can lead to fortune"? Well, that is a quote from William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. And I never read Julius Caesar or had to study it in school, and maybe you didn't either. But you've probably heard that quote because it's been floating around in the English culture for hundreds of years. And in fact, it is a part of what's called the collective unconscious. So whether we know about tides consciously or about Julius Caesar, we have the sense that when the tide is high, it can lead to fortune or success. Now, does that mean that if you dream of a low tide, you're not going to have success? No, it only means that it's not the right time to move forward for success. So let me tell you a story. I love to read historical romance novels. Yes, this does have to do with it because always the hero is rich and he's always owning ships. And when he's leaving, he always has to leave at high tide. And in Shakespeare's time, since there were no nuclear-powered ships or airplanes or jets, everyone, if they were traveling long distances, had to go by these wind-powered ships. And it was very important, since all they were relying on was wind, if they were leaving, they had to leave with the tide, which meant when the tide was high or at its flood, you know, a harbor is usually in a river, which means that the water is flowing down to the sea. That's the current, which is great. But there's another current, and that's the tidal current. So if the tide is coming in, now it is fighting against the current of the river. So if you want to leave with your ship that's laden with goods to trade, the best time to leave is when both currents are going out to sea, and that is when the tide is at the flood. So now you've got the current from the river and the current from the tide, and you can easily sail out. So that's why these heroes in the historical romance novels are always having to meet high tide. So if you've had a dream about a high tide, it means it's time to act, to go forward. And water dreams have to do with emotions. So what is the emotion associated with a high tide dream? It would be confidence. Be confident. It's time to move forward. And what is the emotion associated with a low tide dream? That would be patience. Wait until it's time to leave. Now, does that mean that if you've had a low tide dream, you're supposed to do nothing? No, because if you go back to the olden days, that is when they are loading the ship up. They are loading it with trade goods. They're loading it with food for the crew. They are making sure that all the equipment is repaired. So your tide dream is a timing dream, and the emotions associated with it are confidence and patience, depending on whether it's a high tide dream or a low tide dream. While you were listening to this video, you might have gotten an aha and said, I know exactly what my dream is about now that you know what a high tide or a low tide dream means. However, if you want some clarity how this symbol applies to your own particular life, well, I have provided a 3-step creative dream interpretation checklist. You can find the link for that down below in the description. I'm Carol Ann Chapman, and I believe that in your dreams you receive messages from your powerful, eternal, subconscious mind that help you with your waking life. I believe you can also receive dreams about past lives, including your experiences as an Atlantean. Now, here are the links to my other videos on water dreams, and there's also for reincarnated Atlanteans if you happen to be one of them. It's been nice talking with you. Toodaloo. See you in the next video.